The scariest times for NFL organizations now until the start of training camp, making sure everybody is good to go for the return of camp.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you worry about that when, they're not in a building and no structure, no regimen. That's fun. But I don't know. I kind of, maybe I'm older, but I just feel like we're in a different day and age. I think people are smarter. I think people are more aware. It's not to say that people don't do dumb things sometimes. Of course they do. But I just think sometimes that there's a heightened awareness that there's been so much education that's been instilled in these young men, and they've watched so many things unfold, good and bad, that I like to think, and maybe I'm being naive, that people are just a little bit savvier about making smarter decisions. Now, watch that blow up in my face here in the next few weeks. Certainly could happen. But I just think, look, there's always going to be things that happen and go wrong and people make mistakes. But it doesn't feel to me over the last 4, 5, 6 years like there have been quite as many as there used to be.
Adam,
which, by the way, in a day and age where there's more scrutiny than ever before, I think it's even more impressive.
I think with guys like Andrew and his age group, they don't remember when guys used to come to training camp to get into shape and to play themselves into shape. That nowadays in the NFL, and you've seen it over your evolution of being with the game, now these players, it's a completely different sort of mindset. I think there's a more professional approach all year long, the 12 months of the year, to being ready to go.
Well, and to add to that, John, these guys are entering a professional world sooner than they ever have. They're being paid in college. And so they recognize there's money to be had there. So maybe they're putting more emphasis on training or nutrition or behavior or appearances or relationships, even in college, maybe even in high school. I'm just telling you, I had at one point in time, a high school player called me. He's like, hey, if I go to Michigan, would you tweet my announcer? I'm like, I don't really do that very often, but if that means something to you and you want to announce it, that's fine. And so, I don't know, like a month later, I hear from one of this guy's representatives who I never hear from, like, in the NFL, and I'm like, what's going on? He goes, hey, I just want to make sure you're going to be tweeting the announcement of that kid. Like, holy cow. Like, you work? Yeah, we've been working since high school.
Wow.
So, it's a different world. I think people are more aware and savvier. Again, people still will make mistakes, and people still will do things that they shouldn't in the next month when they're off. But I really do believe that the percentage of that has gone down in recent years, and I think your explanation is a perfectly logical one, that they're trained to be more professional, think more professional at a younger age than ever before.
See, we're now at a time where there's not much to react to or to ask you about the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm glad to have you on. I'm glad that you just said something about, the college kids getting paid now. Do you foresee a future where more players opt to stay another year in college because they will make more money? And I'm not talking about like the Carson Becks of the world who are a late draft pick, and so they're going to make more money in college. I'm talking about guys that could potentially go in like the second round after 2 years of college. Do you think they'd stay for a third year to try to make that extra bit of money?
I think it's certain big football schools, and again, I don't know exactly how the system works, but I think it's certain big schools where they really get paid. I think it's in the best interest of these players to stay in school as long as they can and make similar, if not more money, and get your degree, and go through college, and gain that added maturity. Like, why would you leave early to jumpstart your career? I know some people are in a rush to get to the NFL level or NBA level, but if people are paying you, look, Michigan, I was at a charity golf tournament last week, the Michigan head coach in football and basketball there, and I was talking to Dusty May about one of the players who went to the NBA this year. And again, he's an impressive kid, and he did well. And he talked about how Michigan was the best year of his life, and And so I'm like, well, why would he go to the NBA? And even he comes from a family that, that is comfortable. So it's like, what are you rushing away from college for? Like, what's the rush? I don't get it. So to me, yeah, I know that's the dream of a lot of players to get to the next level. That's what they want to do. But I if I were advising a kid and the money were the same, I'd be in school, I'd be growing up, I'd be getting my degree, I'd be making money and having fun. And then after all that is completed, then I would turn pro. And again, every case is different, but that's how I would think about it. Yes.
Is it recency bias on my part, Adam, that it seemed like the June 1st cut date this year, post June 1st cuts, was sort of a nothing burger this year?
Yeah.
And I wonder is that because of more flexibility with the cap? That maybe there's just less, teams aren't as tight up against the cap, and maybe there aren't as many. And are there still names out there that you think are going to become bigger stories as we get towards training camp?
Well, first of all, I think there were fewer June 1 cuts, and I think it is in part because the cap has gone up, and I think it's in part because teams are very wise about how they address these contracts year-round. They don't just wait the way they're structured in advance. So, yeah, there was some – and by the way, like there were some June 1st cuts that we hear about earlier. They're just executed. It's a whole combination of factors, but there still are a number of interesting names on the street. Now, if you're a player on the street right now, there's probably a pretty good reason for it. So, I know that we all will get, worked up when Von Miller signs or Keenan Allen signs or some of these guys who still are on the street. And there are some interesting names, but, they've been out there for a long time. And if they're out there this long, either their price was too high or their skills have dropped off or some combination of the both. And so while they're big names and they'll generate some conversation if and when they do sign, I don't know how much of an impact anybody at this time of the year is going to make. There might be, a few guys that break through and really make an impact and a difference. But by and large, I don't. That's not usually the case.
Schefter, what's the next big national story now that Aaron Rodgers is finally signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers? Obviously, we will be following along to see how that goes. But what's the next big national story that we're going to be keeping a close eye on?
Well, I think I'll give myself cover here, and I'll just say when the pass rushers are paid, right? Because Trey Hendrickson's still upset with the Bengals, hasn't reported. T.J. Watt staying away from Pittsburgh, and we're waiting for Micah Parsons to become the highest paid defensive player in NFL history, which is what I expect that deal to be when it's done. The highest, like beating Myles Garrett.
Wow. Wow.
Oh, yeah. That's where it's going. And I don't know whether that gets done in a week or a month or right before the season. But Myles will set a new bar, and at that point in time, the Dallas Cowboys will have the highest paid player in football in Dak Prescott and the highest paid defensive player in football. And look, Myles Garrett right now got the deal, right? Like he got the big deal this past offseason, became the highest paid defensive player. And from the age of 26 to 29, so over the last 4 years, Myles Garrett had 216 quarterback pressures and 286 pass rush wins, 216 to 86. Micah Parsons, age 22 to 25, so 4 years younger than Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett's numbers are 216 to 86. Micah Parsons, 251 pressures, 310 pass rush wins, 251, 310, compared to 216, 286. A player 4 years younger. I will say it again. Micah Parsons is going to become the highest paid defensive player in football history.
You realize there's a lot of people in Eagles country that have always said, because Micah seems a little obsessed with the Eagles.
He loves the Eagles.
On his podcast and on draft night and things like that, that people have always thought, oh, he's going to end up being an Eagle. It's obvious from your comments, he's not going to end up being an Eagle.
No, he's going to end up becoming the highest paid defensive player in NFL history.
Wow.
Now, how long he holds that title is a different issue, but when that deal gets done, that is what it will be. I fully expect it.
That's unbelievable.
Wow. All right. Well, Schefty, we're going to keep an eye on that. We appreciate your time
Thanks,
as always,
Adam.
man. Always love having you on, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Guys, Connor Thomas from Kincade and Salciunas. Thanks for watching our interview with Adam Schefter. He's live with the guys every Wednesday at 8 o'clock, so make sure you don't miss it. Also, make sure you like and subscribe to the Fanatic YouTube channel.